Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, presented by Zwift, the online cycling platform that makes training fun. Here's the Liège-Bastogne-Liège recap. Men and women's races. The key is in the name. Starts in Liège. It's up and down. Dan Martin said on Twitter today, like 31 climbs out to Bastogne, back to Liège. But really, we said this last year, this is the hilly version of Milano San Remo. There's two climbs where nothing of note really happens before the first one of them. Côte de la Redoute, 2Ks, 9%. There's a plateau sort of region, and then Côte de la Rochefoucauld, 1.3Ks, 10.5%, before up and down little plateau again, and a descent into the finish. But yeah, nothing really happens before there in the years past. And again today, Benji, decent break went, and the peloton was just controlling.
Yeah, basically like that. And in that breakaway, a few riders that we know that had a good year so far, like Bruno Armirail, been relatively strong in breakaways. And next to that, we also have the likes of Monique together with a teammate of Lado Soudal. Some other riders in there as well, but those were the three most important ones in the breakaway. And nothing really happens, like you mentioned, until we got close towards those climbs, because yes, there was some action beforehand. We had some moves, but mainly a pretty hard crash as well. I think it was in the descent of the Col du Rosier, where what was it, like half the peloton was down, and when looking at it from the front, it just looked like such a high-speed crash in a descent that you're instantly worried about the people that are on the ground when it comes to injuries. And when I saw the helicopter view, I was instantly worried about Julien Alaphilippe, who looked to be first invisible, and then I saw something in a ditch on the right side of the road. Then Bardet went to him, and usually when you crash, you go on your bike and you ride off, but Bardet took the time to check up on Alaphilippe, so that's what made me worried about Alaphilippe's condition. Now, it turns out that he was in the car to the hospital not too much later than that and conscious, so let's hope there's not too much when it comes to injuries for Julien Alaphilippe. When it comes to the rest of the riders, who else was involved? Was Valverde down?
Maybe caught up, but he came back. He wasn't down hard. Pidcock seemed to have been caught up. But yeah, it was a huge crash. I even wondered, are they going to neutralize this race? So I think the second favorite with Pogacar out, he didn't start because his mother-in-law passed away in Slovenia this week. So he was the second favorite. And so then Alaphilippe's crashed out. So it's Wout against Bahrain with Remco, the lone quick stepper, in a reduced group. But before Redoute, we have this area where Bahrain victorious, they didn't really put the pace on hard, and people who could come back did seem to come back, like Pidcock, he did come back. Bahrain started sending riders up the road. Landa attacked about 6 times. They were trying to soften up the group. This didn't really do any damage to any favourites at all that I could see. Kuz followed. Lascano, it was just a domestique on domestique battle. I guess the idea was to try and bait Van Aert into chasing. They even then countered with Wout Poels, who rode in front of the group like 50 meters in front while they were in a headwind and they were freewheeling behind, achieving nothing. I really didn't understand this from Bahrain, Benji. I think they underrated turns. Even after Flesh, they did not ride for turns like you would ride for a Valverde.
I agree in that aspect. I agree that they definitely underrate turns. But on the other hand, I also see a team that has so many riders of a certain value that you have the ability to send someone forward and try and make it harder for the competition, making sure that they spend their domestiques early. So I'm not necessarily going to say that was awful. You shouldn't have done that at all. But the way it was done, it was intriguing because Landa was like, going and then looking back and going and then looking back. And I guess it also gave us a view on who still had the legs to do stuff for the other teams. Like the way Kuz responded to that, the way Allman responded to that for Jumbo meant that Wout van Aert was not completely isolated yet, even with Benoot not being at this race, even with Vingegaard not being that great at this race. So that was intriguing to see. And some other teams like Movistar with Lascano trying to follow and so forth. We know that Valverde also would like to have people stationed with everybody that attacks there and wants to make sure that in the end, it all comes down to him at that team. And when it comes to Mars, was also staying behind. So they were sending like the first area or whatever the word is for the fourth level of domestiques into the moves.
There's
And
no word for that. It doesn't exist.
well, okay, you know what
The
I mean.
lieutenants.
Yeah. But after that, yeah, those moves of Landa never really got anywhere, to be honest, unless you count the fact that Wout Poels decided to ride ahead of the peloton for about 5 minutes in the same way that he did at the Tour de France. I think was it last year where he did that a few times?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly what he did then. So yeah, it was similar. I didn't really get it. I thought they'd want to do hard lead out on Roche, then turns, small group, happy days. That didn't happen because we get to the base of Côte de la Redoute where it's supposed to kick off. But before we mention that, our show partners Zwift, Benji and I, all the last week, we have been using Zwift's meetup feature. It's actually really, really good. You add a friend on Zwift on the platform, and then you can just schedule your own ride together and ride in game. You can communicate via text in the Zwift companion app, or of course, just via voice in Discord, which is what Benji and I typically do in a Discord channel. So that's really good for being able to ride with people who aren't in your physical location, or maybe you're too busy to get out on the bike or the weather's been too bad. So check out the Zwift meetup feature. If you want a free 7-day trial, you can go to Zwift.com through the link down below. Redoute, big bunch. No one's really done anything. The favourites are all fresh. Moritz said there's been a headwind. Anyone in the wheels shouldn't be more tired than they would in any other edition of Liège. And Mary Van Sevenot, Benji paces Redoute. The breakaway splits up. Armirel drops everyone. Van Hoek and Monique and co. He's the last remnant. He will go over Redoute solo. Incredibly strong this year, Armirel. Van Sevenot's pace to me, Benji, didn't seem nuclear.
Yep.
It just seemed to be a positioning pace and a pace to really, well, no one else wanted to attack. I don't even know if it was strong enough to prevent attacks. I just think no one really wanted to.
Yeah, I feel like it was indeed perhaps a tempo to try and control, but you're right, I do see possibilities there to still make moves. Nonetheless, I think the group had thinned out quite a bit from that crash earlier. Certain domestiques from other teams are gone. I think the point at which riders were trying to get ahead was, like Landa earlier on, not so steep climbs, and perhaps even in the sections between climbs, because that might offer opportunities for smaller groups to occur. But clearly, Quickstep wanted to do something here, and Van Sevenant kept that up basically to the top, and it looked like nothing was going to happen. The breakaway was crumbling ahead. Armirai, the only rider left at the front, which is that guy, quite literally, such a solid rider. It's like, I like Armirai. Armirai is cool. But in the peloton, they were setting up for an attack for someone, right?
Yeah, we had a big group. No one really notable drop that I could see. All the favourites there: Valverde, Turns, Haig, well, multiple Bahrain, Pools, Morich, Kosnefra, Paulus. And this reminded me of Paris Stage 1. At the end of Redoute, there is Remco just behind Van Sevenant, right before the crest, and then it levels off. And it's two riders, Paulus and Kosnefra, in front of the top favourites, Wout, Valverde, Mas, there for Valverde, and Turns. And they're on Remco's wheel. No one was on Remco's wheel. That was a top favourite. And he just does this huge explosion out of Van Sevenant's wheel, gets into sort of an aero position on the hoods. Paulus, I don't even really think ever got to his wheel. Kosnefra lost Paulus' wheel very quickly. Paulus loses Remco's wheel, and then Turns. Here's the problem. Here's why you need to be on the wheel. Turns is looking. He's like, nah, I'm not closing that 15 meters, 20 meters now. I'm not going to do it. And that's where the race was done. Right there. If it was Pogacar, if it was Alaphilippe, if it was someone else if it was Wout, Bala and Turns snap close it, and I think Remco was almost fortunate in that he's not actually been winning left, right, and centre. And people are like, well, my domestiques will close it back. The problem with that was we now enter a rolling terrain, perfect for Remco, and Bahrain put Mikel Landa on the front, who's attacked 6 times. And so Remco gets a 30-second gap whilst Bahrain have Landa on the front. I don't know where Thomas was, Benji, for Ineos, where obviously Schachman's not here for Bora, but Bora didn't have anyone to pace. Wout had no domestiques, so I don't expect him to pace. But I think all these chasing teams completely underestimated the danger over Redoute and thought, well, Carapaz got brought back last year.
Again, literally the same scenario as San Sebastian 2019, where he went before we got to the final climb. Remco Evenepoel gets a gap together with Tom Scoins, and he's able to make it larger on the final climb in that San Sebastian. And it is because the other teams don't necessarily chase hard the initial moment that he's getting away. The gaps get larger and larger before they get to the climb. And on the climb itself in that Sebastian, the cooperation wasn't there because the leaders were looking at each other. And I was fearing for the peloton that this would be the exact same scenario from that point onwards, because Remco was storming forward. You said it, 30 seconds, catching Ursulin from the early breakaway, and then he drops him by hopping over a roundabout and getting a 10-meter gap and just building that out on Ursulin, which is there like, wait, mate, I didn't know you could ride over roundabouts, but he got dropped that way. And then eventually Armilai also getting caught, and then it was a duo where one rider was doing all the moving, and where Armilai was just hoping that he could hold on to the wheel of Remco, versus the peloton where Lando was going off the front. At a certain point, he even went like from the front 10 meters ahead of the peloton on a climb, which I was like, why are you doing that, mate? Why are you doing that? That doesn't work here. And then eventually they took over at Mohoric, and that's where it started turning a bit, right?
Well, it stabilized. I wouldn't say it turned like hugely. And this is the thing, Remco would get dropped on Rochefoucauld, I'm pretty sure, on the steep section. And he'd get gapped to some degree by Turns and co. And I guess the problem is if the gap is 35 seconds, which it was into the base of Rochefoucauld, and then all the domestiques go, they can't help as much on Rochefoucauld, and he just does a tempo, drops Army Rail, and it's basically, I think eventually Turns did attack late. The group even, Benji, stalled a bit on Rochefoucauld on the earlier bits. It wasn't so aggressive right from the start. There was no huge lead out. But Turns went. He looked very good. Vlasov looked good, as well as Igita. I think Vlasov, a big attack. And that immediately put like 12, 15 seconds, maybe more into Remco. So this was all about the gap he built up before Rochefoucauld when he was doing a one-up TT against Mikel Landa, not a one-up TT against 50 guys. And that's the story of this race. Vlasov, Igita Turns, get a small gap. They don't work. Mas brings Bala back. That then stalls the group. Wout's been dropped. He didn't have it today, but then he comes back on Boncel because the group's not working. And all of that not working means Remco's gone. Solo's away, knows he wins unless he crashes, starts celebrating 3Ks from the line, and an incredible win solo for Remco Evenepoel. Just attacked when everyone knew he should attack, because he can't drop people on the uphill, can't win a sprint, has to go far. No Alaphilippe even as a threat behind. Almost saves Quickstep's classic season. It's what they really, really needed today. And his biggest ever career win.
I'd argue it's saving their cobble season, well, not cobble season, but their pre-season most likely quite well. I'd argue it's a very good result for Quickstep. Yes, Alaphilippe fell out of the race. That's a very bad thing for the team going forward. Hopefully the injuries are not really going to influence the Tour de France, for example, for him. But when it comes to Evenepoel pulling this off, this is very good for both Quickstep's team, but also for the future of Evenepoel, because now, like, every single time this guy goes on the internet, he's getting shit on by both the traditional media and on social media by like half the people. And I'm so happy that he's able to prove them wrong in the race with his legs, because that's how you're supposed to do it. And he does it wonderfully. And it's also the same scenario that this was such a predictable scenario. Like, we said it multiple times. La Redoute is the place where Remco will attack. Now, I'm not going to lie, I might have expected it more on the climb than right at the top, despite it being obvious that he would do it at the top in hindsight. But the way those chases do the exact same thing as in San Sebastian, where they just underrate that rider going forward. And like you said, it's because perhaps they don't realize his strength anymore because he hasn't been able to achieve it in World Tour level recently. But now the question lies, how are we going to look at the sprint for second? Because Wout van Aert is in that second group, and can Belgium make this a 1-2?
Well, not just a 1-2. Vlasov had counted on the flat. He had a Gita in the group. A lovely move from Bora. and Movistar were fucking it up further. They had 2 in the group, and you have to send one guy if the guy from the other team with 2 in the group attack. They don't. They then actually don't pull with Mas. And Danny Martinez said, what are you doing? You have Valverde here. Wout's off the back. What are you doing? And that lets Wout come back. We didn't really see much of it. They eventually catch Vlasov, and it's a huge group. Like the biggest group we've seen going into the finish in Liège. Well, I guess it's group 2. Like 14, 15 riders almost, 13 riders. Well, sort of lead. No, Israel lead out the sprint, which wasn't probably a good idea at all. They had Fulsang and Woods, and they need points desperately, and they both finished 10th and 13th in the end. And Wout comes out. He goes early because he doesn't want to get boxed in. Higuita's in his wheel, and it's actually Quinten Hermans. I hadn't seen him in the group, didn't even know how he got back. He comes second. Everyone was like, what? Where did Quinten Hermans come from? Which I think suggests how slowly they'd finesse after they caught Vlasov. And actually, Wout comes third, but I think Higuita might have done him if Wout hadn't deviated to the right and closed off Higuita to the barriers. Martinez actually ends up fourth. So big win for Remco, 48 seconds. I'll round out the top 10 rather. Evenepoel, Hermans, Van Aert, Martinez, Higuita, Turns, who I think was very, very strong on Roche. Valverde 7th, Paulus 8th, Hirschi 9th, Woods 10th. Haig was riding as Domestique 11th. Actually, I think his best level for quite a while. He looked very good today. Mas 12th, Fulsang 13th, Vlasov 14th. So, yeah. Who's losing sleep tonight, Benji? I think it's Bahrain and Dylan Turns.
Yeah, I think Bahrain's definitely losing sleep over this, and they will look at this race scenario and try and figure out where they lost it. And I think the chase is certainly a part of that. I think the attack of Pools was useless as well. I do think that early attack of Landa could be in the race as a decent strategy to figure out stuff, but the Pools attack was definitely not necessary in this race, and it could have played a role later perhaps. But I want to highlight the 1, 2, 3 of Belgium in this race, because please cancel my deportation process, Belgium. I don't want to leave this country. It's the first time since 1976, according to this Twitter user called Joflu, and we all know that once something on Twitter, it is right. So I'm believing this person. And that's big. That's big. That's awesome. It's been like, in the last 10 years, only Gilbert was able to podium this race when he won it. So it's pretty cool to see. Now the question lies, and I'm going to throw this one at you as well. Who do you think should lead the Belgium team in Wollongong based on this race?
Oh, simple. You do the same strategy as what happened today. Remco early attack, Wout Marks moves behind, and then is a threat for the sprint. Like
Quinten
they should have done
Hermans.
last year. Does Sven know this? Does Sven van Torenhout know this? Does he watch Liège? That guy?
I would guess so, but based on last year's tactics, he might not have watched every race.
They just do repeat this strategy, and you got your best chance. Like it's not complicated. You got Dylan Turns as well as another option. I think Van Sevenot's pacing on Redoute will probably go underrated. It was important in that it meant domestiques couldn't quickly react, and it was favourites and leaders who were like, "Do I burn a match here chasing Remco? Nah, I'll risk it for the biscuit."
And later, Van Zevenand also played a big role in the chase when it comes to blocking, because at a certain point he was in second wheel behind the Bahrain rider.
He was good.
Then he started fighting with Higuita over something that Van Zevenand caused, in my personal opinion, even though we know that Higuita is not the best steering person either. I'd argue that the shoulder was mainly given by Van Zevenand there, but just annoying that chasing group just betters the chances of the rider up front, and that's very cool to see. But I also want to shine a light on Philippe Gilbert, who rode his last LBL this year, based on his alleged retirement at the end of the year. And it was so awesome to see the moment where he was riding up La Redoute. I swear the dude was crying in his glasses, like 100%. He can't not have cried there.
I mean, he was getting dropped on Redoute. I don't know if that was bittersweet.
Perhaps that's the reason you were crying, like...
Yeah, if I was Lotto's account keeper paying him, I would have been crying. Seeing that, not a great day for them. But yeah, Gilbert and Valverde as well, not the result he would have wanted. I don't think, he wasn't good in that sprint either. On Evenepoel though, he said it's been a difficult 15 1.5 years, 18 months since his crash in Lombardia 2020, coming back from that. He even said in an interview I saw, and Occam's razor, remember when we had that clip, Benji, about why does Remco keep getting dropped on really steep gradients?
Yeah.
Turns out in Valenciana, he was 66 kilos. He raced in the Giro last year at 60.5. So again, this win is incredible. This race suits him a lot. He played it perfectly. And yeah, I've been a Remco sort of booster since 2019, but that sort of information is still concerning. It's like, why is your weight yo-yoing 10%? It's less than that now. Does this mean that he's going to win the Vuelta? I mean, I'm pretty bullish on him at the Vuelta, but not necessarily. It's just like this suits Liège, this suits Wout, but it doesn't mean he can win the Tour de France as well. I still think, though, it's good to see. I think it's good for cycling that we have multiple hype superstars winning things. Like, it's better for the sport that Remco wins this, Pog wins that, Wout wins something, Mathieu van der Poel wins Flanders, and we have the Aramburu winning a Gran Camino stage maybe next year. Yeah, it's good. It's like, I'm not going to lie, it's going to be better for my video that I do later tonight. Remco Sola than Quinten Hermans winning from a bunch sprint. Like, let's be honest.
Imagine.
Oh yeah, fuck. I'd find a way. I would find a way to hype it up. But yeah, I think Remco silenced a lot of the haters today, Benji.
Yep, certainly. And it's always cool to see that. And perhaps it might even fuel other haters into hating him even more. And that's what happens on the internet. Once you get like better, there's also people that might hate you more for it. But I think he shouldn't care about it. He's performing, and that's the most important part. And people that support him are supporting him, and that counts for every single other rider. Pogacar had haters when he was winning everything a month ago, for example, and then he started losing, and he's suddenly not as hated as he was a month ago. It's such a wave of events in these last few months when it comes to riders getting hated and non-hated, but I don't care.
Yeah, like, if you win a lot, you get haters. That's just how it is. Remco was the curious one because he wasn't winning a lot of races and got a lot of haters. That was what was weird. Before we move on to the women's race, I have a message. Hear me. Quickstep press officer Patrick Lefevre, Soudal Quickstep are not paying you a lot of money for Remco not to be a superstar. I demand give him access back to his Twitter account now. He's won a monument. I am sick of seeing these scripted fucking tweets. Give him access back. I want to see the tweets. The Strava titles are all we have at the moment, where he's saying, can't wait for Bolognese, a play on words for his girlfriend's name. No, I want a Moto de Merd tweets. I want him pulling a phone out of his pocket while he's solo tweeting a video. Okay? Thank you, Quickstep. If you could sort that out, that'd be great. Anyway, that was Liège men's. Quickstep win again after Jungels a few years ago. Lots of exciting stuff coming up. We have Romandy next week, and then Benji and I are heading to Budapest in, like, scary Benji, I think 8 days, just over a week. I am completely unprepared. So,
Me too.
Yeah, we'll be doing. Let us know if anyone else is going. We'll be watching the first two stages, the Grande Partenza, which goes from Budapest, and then the TT is all around Budapest, and then we won't see the third stage. Well, I won't. At least Benji can if he wants to, which is out at Peloton Fured, about 100 k's away.
Yeah, and I want to add that if you want a question to be asked, because we're going to do a Q&A once we get to Hungary, then drop it below in the comment section on YouTube or throw it at us on Twitter. Or, yeah, that's probably the two ways that we'll do it. We don't have like a Dove system that you can send like doves with little letters to us yet. So we're going to have to do it with Twitter and YouTube comment sections for now. If you have questions for us, throw it at us, and we'll try and respond as many good ones as possible on that podcast as well once we get into Budapest, and I'm looking forward to it.
Can't wait. Been a big couple of months, and it'll be nice to get out of the house, and we'll have some good content, not just the preview and recaps coming for you on LRCP. But thanks as always for listening, and of course for Zwift, who are making that trip to Budapest possible, and we'll see you with Romandy tomorrow, I think. Ciao.